what I've done is I've switched to portfolio allocations. And again, I'm going to click create a copy, which I'm going to call portfolio allocations applied. And then we'll run through how all of this works. So first of all, I'm just going to change over, and you can see, by the way, that we have a financial shortfall here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to change over to portfolio builders. What it will do is, depending on the type of portfolio you've applied, it will take, for example, a balanced portfolio, and if the portfolio needs to work a little harder, what it'll do is it'll select the next highest return portfolio in the list, in this case, a growth portfolio. And it'll do that for the SMA's portfolio, so core balanced in this case, a net return of 681. A global balanced isn't much higher, 682. But special opportunities is 708. And the same idea with the asset allocation model. It will move the model from one rate of return to the next highest rate of return. So if we go back to VisionWorks now and have a look at the allocation tab, what I want you to notice is that for all of the portfolios, Bill's the joint non-reg portfolio, Bill's TFSA, RSP, Sue's TFSA, and RSP. What I've done for all of them, just to keep this illustration simple, is I've applied a rate of return, the balanced portfolio, until 2030, when I've then applied the conservative portfolio. These are the basic portfolios. What I just want to remind you of is that in any of the reallocation models that I've seen in other software, what they do is they apply a rate of return, and then they adjust to a higher rate of return. What would you need to earn through the whole course of the plan? So I want you to keep in mind that VisionWorks is a dynamic model, where you can have changes not only to vacation expenses over time, but also to portfolios over time. And we'll have a look at that when we go back to presentations. And I also want to remind you that we don't need to apply changes to all portfolios. We could have some money in some portfolios that's long-term money, assuming a higher risk, for example, whereas we have other buckets that we're going to use in the shorter term, to meet our more immediate cash flow needs. So I think it's very important to be able to select different portfolios and not necessarily apply a rate of a change in return. This is money that I'm going to need in the next few years, but be able to select other portfolios where the investments are longer term. So let's go back to presentations and planning tactics. And the way this works is that if we select portfolio allocations, you can see Bill's RSP, for example, it has a weighted return of 4.67%. And that's taking the balanced portfolio, applying it for the next 5 years, and then taking the conservative portfolio and applying it through his life expectancy, which is 15 more years. So the overall average return over the number of years is actually a weighted return of 4.67% for that portfolio. What the software is going to do then, when we click calculate, is it's going to go through and increase Bill's balanced portfolio return to the growth portfolio, but only through the next change year, which is the conservative portfolio. Then it'll go to the Sue's RSP, increase that rate of return, but only to the next highest return portfolio, but only to the next change point. So it's going to go through and do that with all portfolios. And if that resolves our financial shortfall, then nothing more will be done. But if it doesn't, then it'll go back to the first portfolio, start with that change year and increase it to the next highest return through to the next change year. So it takes a very gradual approach in order to find what kind of portfolio changes need to be applied in order to achieve, the income asset issue or correct the income asset issue, but in doing so, by applying the least amount of change possible, accepting the least amount of additional risk possible. So it's not an all in for all portfolios. So I'm just going to click calculate. And this is where we could, if we wished, deselect some portfolios, say, this is short-term money. I'm going to need it over the next few years. I'm going to keep a low level of risk. Others, longer-term money, and I'm going to accept more risk with it. So we'll just click the continue button. And in this particular case, I already know that the income asset shortfall is such that all of the portfolios will have to have an increased rate of return, actually up to the highest return available for the growth portfolio. So you can see in all years, it's now the growth portfolio. You can see the change it makes, $234,000, $250,000, but we still have a bit of a shortfall. And I just might add that, correcting that kind of shortfall might, in addition to any of the other financial planning tactics, might also include things like downsizing a house or applying a reverse mortgage or whatever it may be.